Hello everyone, this is Scott Hummel. I teach English at Chesapeake Math and IT Academy in Laurel, Maryland. So last school year I taught English 11 to 17-year-olds, and this upcoming school year I will be teaching English 9 and 10 honors to 15 and 16-year-olds. So this semester of EDTC 615 has taught me a lot about the data analysis process and how to apply the findings to the classroom to best serve the student. So specifically, Venable's data action model was a primary focus of this semester. So we went through the different data meetings in our groups. We started with data meeting number 1, where we pulled the data, and then through analyzing that data we developed notice and wonder statements, which led to exploratory questions. So for my data I used last year's MAP scores, so measures of academic progress. Students take this assessment in the fall, winter, and spring, and so it's nice because we have, for that one student, we can compare how they did on the 3 assessments, and then we can also break it down into components to see how they fared with the literature on the assessment, with informational text, or with vocabulary. So in analyzing my data, I noticed correlations between low RIT scores and low scores in vocabulary acquisition and use and informational text. So these notice statements led me to wonder what factors contribute to a student receiving a low MAP score. I wonder why students struggle with informational text, generally speaking. And then these wonder statements led me to the exploratory questions of how might we differentiate instruction and vocabulary, how might we better differentiate, how we might improve our close reading strategies concerning informational text. Okay, so this first data meeting is crucial to the success of the data action model, and it was very relieving to analyze data from this perspective, where we're looking at the big picture. We're not looking at test scores and expecting a knee-jerk reaction on how to improve those test scores, which is somewhat commonplace within my district, and I'm sure a lot of other districts. So knowing how and where, when and where to start the data analysis process is critical. So moving along the data action model, once we develop these exploratory questions, we gather artifacts and begin to triangulate the data. So artifacts that I gathered included, well, the MAP scores themselves, but also I pulled a vocabulary assignment from this past March to see how students did with that, and generally I pulled 3 student samples for that assignment. And then my third artifact was a close reading assignment, so I could see how they fared as far as vocabulary, but also this had an informational text component to it. So using those 3 artifacts, I put those in the artifact tracking sheet and use this heading into data meeting number 3, where we identified instructional or learning gaps, and then set a target learning goal and decided on an evaluation metric. So in some cases there was both a learning and instructional gap, or simply a learning gap. So once we identify these gaps, we're then developing SMART goals. We're planning for action. We're developing a data action plan to see how we can close these learning or instructional gaps. So one of the SMART goals that I had developed was that students will earn at least a RIT score on the math of 220 on both informational text and vocabulary usage and acquisition. And they will receive this score after taking the winter map assessment. So it's clearly relevant, it's measurable, it's timely. However, after meeting data meeting number 5, I met with Will, and he suggested that I make my SMART goals more specific. In other words, okay, students will earn at least a RIT score of 220, but how? What are we going to do to get them to that point? His other suggestion was that artifacts not only be of student work, but we can also gather artifacts of what the teacher is doing, what the teacher is giving to the students to close those gaps. So if I were to make revisions, they would definitely be concerning my SMART goals and making them more specific. I would but for my first time working through the data action model, I feel like it went pretty well, fairly well, but there are definitely some areas where I could improve. For instance, the collecting of artifacts for data triangulation. I don't know if this would be a weakness, but I feel like this is definitely an area where I can improve. So, first of all, making sure that I develop assignments and assessments that will best serve the students in terms of improving their vocabulary acquisition and their understanding and comprehension of informational text, but then also being able to recognize those artifacts as being relevant to the data triangulation within this model. I feel as though a strength that I have is the identification of learning and instructional gaps. That part of the process seemed to run rather smoothly for me after the data was analyzed, and it was somewhat plain to see where the students were falling short, or where I was falling short in my instruction. So in conclusion, I would just say that the semester has been very informative. It has got me to look at data in a new light. So when I go back to school here in a few weeks, I don't think that I will cringe anymore when I hear the word data, because now I know that simply by going about data analysis in the right manner through the data action model can make all the difference in the world. So, thank you very much.